brokered by eXp Realty. Today we're going to talk about 1031 exchange, and who else but the title queen, Erika Baldino, to be in the office here to talk with us about 1031 exchange. So let's sit down with Erika and see what a 1031 exchange is. Hi Erika, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So we had a good conversation about title insurance, and another topic that people are interested in, don't really know a lot about, is 1031 exchange. I know that a lot of investors know about it, some don't know about it, what are the benefits of it. So just wanted to have you here and talk to us and tell us everything there is to know about 1031s.
Sure. So I am what is called a 1031 qualified intermediary. So I'm not an accountant. I can't give accounting advice, but I act as sort of the conduit for the money that travels when you do a 1031 exchange. I'll tell you, it is not the product for flippers. You have to keep the house as a rental for conservatively 2 years, more liberally a year, but it has to show rental income. When it comes to flippers, there's other ways to sort of, have write-offs and figure out what to do with your taxes on that end. This is for capital gains as you've depreciated assets in the long term. So what happens typically when you have a rental house is that your accountant will depreciate it, and sometimes, depending on how long you hold the house, your cost basis will be at zero. In that scenario, if somebody like you comes along and says, hey, let's list it, or hey, I have a buyer for double of what you purchased it, 10 years ago, you could get hit with a lot of gains. And sometimes it's a pain point for people when they're making the decision to sell, is the amount of gains that they're going to have. So what we do as a 1031 exchange QI is we defer those gains. You can defer them into another property or properties, or you can put them into what's called a Delaware statutory trust.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if I bought a house 10 years ago, paid, let's say, $100,000, meantime, over these 10 years, my accountant wrote it off, depreciation, and now I go ahead after 10 years, sell it for $200,000, which means I made $100,000 plus all those years of depreciation, whatever that would be. I could take that, if I would sell it plainly, I would pay taxes on $100K plus.
Plus, yep.
So if I take that and put it in a 1031 exchange, I then have to buy another property, correct?
So that's correct. So you could buy another property or properties, or you could buy into what's called a Delaware statutory trust, which is a way for you to sort of buy into a fund so that you don't have to self-manage the property. There'll be a property owner that manages the fund, and then you don't have to deal with it.
So if I bought a property with the $200,000, I would not pay any capital gains.
You would defer the capital gains.
I would defer the capital gains.
Yes.
Okay, so if I bought a property and sold it in a few years, I would pay all the taxes on that money that I deferred the gains?
Unless you 1031 it again, right? So what they say in my industry is swap till you drop, which is kind of a really crazy way of saying continue to 1031, continue to swap property to property, so that when you pass away, your next of kin will inherit it at a step-up in basis. And that's sort of the magic of the 1031 exchange, is that step-up rule. So, you'll get the example where, little old lady comes from Italy and buys a brownstone for 10 grand a million years ago, and the family has 1031'd it into a $10 million portfolio, and when the little old lady passes away, they will inherit it at a step-up in basis at the $10 million valuation. So all the gains from 10,000 all the way up are just deferred, and eventually eliminated.
Wow, so if somebody inherited the property, they would not pay any of the capital gains?
Correct. There could be other applicable estate taxes, but for the capital gains on the property, they would inherit it at a step-up in basis and not be penalized for that.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's great for estate planning. It's great for wealthy families that want to keep money within the family. And listen, everybody's different. I mean, I just had a client that had a $7 million warehouse in Patterson, and they were going to pay $2 million in capital gains on it. So we had gone over information session with them to try to get the then, 4 children to sell it and buy something else, and they were kind of just like, we don't feel like dealing with daddy's stuff. We want the $5 million. We're going to pay the $2 million in taxes. You know, and then I have other investors that when they find out their tax bill is $20,000, they're like, how do we defer it? How do we get rid of those capital gains? I'm not giving the IRS any money. So, you know, different strokes for different folks, I guess.
To each their own,
Right.
as we say.
And it sort of allows you as their real estate agent to help them diversify the portfolio. So sometimes we get people that are just tired of managing, you know, the 10-unit building in Jersey City that might be worth $1.5 million, you know, $2 million. So they would come to you and you could put them into a triple net, right? Perhaps a CVS or a Walgreens, or, you know, a bunch of Airbnb condos in Miami, or a warehouse or retail. So it gives the client the opportunity to diversify.
Okay, and is there a time limit from when I sell to when I buy? How does that work?
So it's a very good question that I go over a lot with clients. It really depends. So there is a timeline, and how you sort of go about navigating the timeline depends on market conditions. So in the current market where you kind of have to kiss a lot of frogs until you get a prince, right? You kind of have to put a lot of bids on houses until one sticks.
Yes.
You should start to look for that replacement property prior to even selling. And sometimes I have clients that are actually under contract prior to even selling. Because once you sell the asset, you have 45 days to identify and a full 180 days to close. So during that 45 days, you really need to have a good idea of what you're buying, because if you don't close on one of the properties listed, you'll blow the entire exchange.
Wow. So I only have 45 days to identify a property that I want and half a year to close on it.
Correct.
So what happens if I identified a property after 30 days and it fell through in inspections, we didn't go through with the transaction, and now we're at day 50 or 60? What happens now?
So you blow the exchange, and I have to keep the money for the full 180 days. So it's super problematic if you don't follow the timeline, because I do legally have to hold on to your money for the 180 days, and you're gonna pay all of those capital gains. So what we advise is there's a couple different rules when used to identify. The one that's most common with newer investors is what's called the 3 property rule. So you should identify at least 3 potential properties. God forbid that scenario happens. I've also seen properties burn down.
Wow.
I've seen, especially during COVID, sellers would pass away and it would take more than a half a year to get their estate probated because the counties were so slow, so they couldn't sell the house. So what we do is we tell people, identify 2 properties that you're really dead set on that you know you can get, and then identify the third as that DST that I was telling you about earlier, because normally you can always still kind of get into the DST and you can use that as a safety net.
Wow.
Not ideal for everybody, but better than paying capital gains.
Of course, anything is better than paying capital gains or taxes.
Yep.
You know, whatever we could protect ourselves,
Yep.
let's do it.
I agree.
So I guess this was a very good information. I learned a lot here. Hope the people out there learned also.
Yep. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to help you sell your next investment property.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.